go to youtube.com/alprofit, hit the join button, become a member, support content so I can get more political, and you're gonna get to see a lot of stuff that others won't see, and I'm gonna be uploading all the stuff I have on Amazon for you members to see too. And if I'm not doing it fast enough, be sure and remind me. Thanks a lot.
We broke the story yesterday, how Frank Sheeran, a self-confessed mob hitman, a close friend of Jimmy Hoffa, and
my recollection is he was totally incoherent. He didn't make any sense. And I wonder if there was something physically wrong with him at the time. Now, whether he came out of that and was able to tell his stories subsequent to that, or whether he just always spun those stories in that fashion, I have no idea. But when I read the book, I Heard You Paint Houses, I was very skeptical about it, given that I had met Sheeran and said, I don't know that I can believe anything this guy's telling me. As a reporter at Meet the Press kind of thing, I walked away saying, I don't want to touch the story because I don't know where this guy's coming from, and I don't even know if he's totally there when he's talking to me.
Frank Sheeran was a high-ranking union official out of Pennsylvania and Delaware, as well as a high-ranking mob associate that was very close to Russell Bufalino. He was Bufalino's bodyguard and driver. He was another man that would often act as a go-between or a liaison between the mob and Hoffa.
They stop at Port Clinton in Ohio, near Toledo. Sheeran gets out, climbs in a small private plane, and they fly to Detroit, and they land at the Pontiac airport. Sheeran gets in a car that's waiting for him, drives to this location, picks up a couple of guys, goes up to the Marcus Red Fox to get Jimmy, bring him back, and Sheeran kills him. But I had a pilot tell me you can't just fly a private plane to Pontiac Metro Airport. You gotta get around the air traffic area. And he found his story to be a little improbable.
They heard that Sheeran was writing a book, and they wanted to bring me on as a consultant about Sheeran. But then that one fell apart because they just caught him in so many lies. And apparently Maria Shriver had done the interview. Once again, they're going to bring me on as a consultant, and once again, Sheeran's lies just caused the whole thing to fall apart. In 2001, he says Sal Bergoglio's the killer. Then 2003, when Dateline NBC calls me, there's one different thing. And I said, what's that? He says, Sheeran's now claiming that he is the killer. And I'm going, he's saying himself that he did the job? And he said, yeah. He says, what's more valuable, a book by a guy who was there, or a book by a guy who actually pulled the trigger?
Or you're going to get somebody like Frank Sheeran, who also claims to have been involved in the murder of Joey Gallo, and also claims to have provided the guns that were used in the Kennedy assassination. Well, if those things are true, this guy stayed under the radar for a very, very long time, and it's kind of hard to believe. But that's who's telling us that he helped do away with Jimmy Hoffa.
He said he killed, talk about him killing, saying he's killed Sal Bergoglio, and tell us about Sal Bergoglio.
Bergoglio was
gunned down, selling bugs. He was Provenzano's right-hand man.
Right.
He was killed in '78.
I mean, Sheeran was mostly concerned about the money because he was going to die and he was broke and he needed to leave some money to his family.
Well, I never bought the Frank Sheeran story. I mean, if you're the Mafia, all right, if you're organized crime and you're going to kill a person like Jimmy Hoffa, kidnap and kill him, why would you bring in a guy who's not part of your organization, who's not subject to the rules and discipline, who hasn't agreed to what you believe in? Why would you bring in somebody from the outside? They certainly had more than enough people capable, and in the government's opinion, more than enough people who murdered people in the past. There's no need to go outside and find anybody else.
I have a hard time believing his story strictly based on the fact of where he claims the murder took place. He claims it took place off 7 Mile in Detroit on a street named Beaverland, which would be a good 20-25 minute drive from the Marcus Red Fox. And it's a house that he can't source to anybody. He can't claim whose house it was or why they took him there.
There was a DNA analysis done of the bloodstains found in the entrance of the house. They proved not to be Hoffa, which was really disappointing to a lot of us because we really wanted to see this thing done once and for all.
I personally have a difficult time believing that the Mafia would set up the
Well, yeah, see, the problem is he's got credibility problems. The story on Sheeran was that he was with Russell Buffalino, and they were driving to Detroit to go to the wedding of one of the other Buffalino's daughters in Macomb County. So they stop at Port Clinton in Ohio, near Toledo. Sheeran gets out, climbs in a small private plane, and they fly to Detroit, and they land at the Pontiac airport. Sheeran gets in a car that's waiting for him, drives to this location, picks up a couple of guys, goes up to the Marcus Red Fox to get Jimmy, bring him back, and Sheeran kills him. Okay, that's believable, but I had a pilot tell me you can't just fly a private plane to Pontiac Metro Airport. You gotta get around the air traffic area. And he found his story to be a little improbable. Was Sheeran right? Sheeran could have been right. Maybe Sheeran was there. Maybe he was involved. Maybe he was even the killer. I don't know. I don't know that anybody knows.
Frank Sheeran, 6'4", Irish, the Teamsters Union in Wilmington, Delaware, which is just a 30-minute drive from Philadelphia, became a major figure. He was close to Buffalino. He also was close to Hoffa. He had served, I think, with General Patton in World War II.
Well, do you think all that stuff is definitely true?
Wow.
His story about the military?
His military service?
Brandt presumably checked that out.
Yeah. That's the story. The story he tells, the story that his family tells us, that he was serving in World War II and he became a killer, and that it just carried that into his civilian life. Now, is that a justification or an explanation for why? Perhaps. He had a reputation as a headbanger, as a mob and organized crime enforcer, and that's what he did. And to the extent that I don't think Frank Sheeran was a guy who was so much a decision maker as a follower. He was a guy who would be the guy that Buffalino would go to. He was a guy who my boss Angelo Bruno in Philadelphia would go to. He was a guy who wasn't. Violence came second nature to him, according to people who know him. Violence was part of what he brought to the table, and that was an asset. That was a value, and that's who Sheeran was. He also was a Teamster official, and that gave him access to Hoffa and to the other Teamster leaders, and put him at the table. So you got all of those factors that play in: the mob connections, the Teamster connections, the 6'4", bigger than life Irish guy, very personable, a fun guy to be around. So you got all of those elements in play. He's moving around in those circles, and he claims that he was part of the team that killed Hoffa. I don't know.
I've always been suspicious about the stories that painters and everybody else has. I was involved in the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. He was here, he was there. I think there are a very small select number of members of what we would traditionally call organized crime who were involved. I think all of them bought into the Code of Omerta. I don't think any of them have ever spoken. It's certainly not, they may have given hints to friends and associates, but there's never been anybody come out, and I think the vast majority, if not all the people directly involved, are dead today. So they've taken that to their grave with them. Now you get bits and pieces.
Tell us about Frank Sheeran.
Well, I never bought the Frank Sheeran story. If you're the Mafia, all right, if you're organized crime and you're going to kill a person like Jimmy Hoffa, kidnap and kill him, why would you bring in a guy who's not part of your organization, who's not subject to the rules and discipline, who hasn't agreed to what you believe in? Why would you bring in somebody from the outside? They certainly had more than enough people capable, and in the government's opinion, more than enough people who've murdered people in the past. There's no need to go outside and find anybody else. And you would hear stories from guys who claim they were asked to dispose of a car, or bring a package here, or bring a box here. And the Bureau correctly, assiduously pursued all of those. But I never believed that. I think that these guys knew that they had to keep this operation to members of their own organization, keep the number of people involved in any substantive way as small as possible, so that the number of potential leaks is dramatically minimized. And all these people bought into a theory where you just don't talk about that.
I remember, I guess this would have been in the mid-'90s, the late 90s. He had just come out of prison. and an impresario in Philadelphia named Harry J. Katz was shepherding him around and promoting his story. And there was some kind of press conference or meet the press kind of thing where we all sat down to talk. And I had never met Sheeran face to face before. I'd written some stuff about Teamsters Local 107 in Philadelphia and the Sheeran and the mob connections. But this guy's up there telling stories. But my recollection is he was totally incoherent. He didn't make any sense. And I wonder if there was something physically wrong with him at the time. Now, whether he came out of that and was able to tell his stories subsequent to that, or whether he just always spun those stories in that fashion, I have no idea. But when I read the book, I Heard You Paint Houses, I was very skeptical about it, given that I had met Sheeran and said, I don't know that I can believe anything this guy's telling me. As a reporter at Meet the Press kind of thing, I walked away saying, I don't want to touch this story because I don't know where this guy's coming from, and I don't even know if he's totally there when he's talking to me.
You go back and look at all these books that have been written. There was a guy that, a prisoner, an assassin that wrote a book that claims, what's his last, Kuklinski? He claims he killed Hoffa. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. What motivates a guy to make up the story that says he killed Hoffa before he died? Well, these guys don't think the way the rest of us do. Well, I'll tell you, as a reporter and as the guy that was out there with, the Fox News Network guys were nice enough to invite me along on their Hoffa search. And it's possible Hoffa was killed in that house on Beaverland in Detroit. I see no reason to believe why he wasn't. I think he was taken to a house, and I think he was killed. The feds had speculated that it was at Marvin Odell's house, which was just around the corner from the Marcus Red Fox. O'Brien had been living in that house, and for it to happen there, they would have had to kill him. They would have had to clean up the house while Marvin Odell was away and his wife was away. I don't think it's likely that they killed him there. I think they killed him someplace else. Could have been at the house on Beaverland. Story, as I recall in Charlie Brandt's book, was that the woman lived in that house, and they essentially, she was sort of out of it or wasn't paying much attention, and that's where they did it. The fact that the investigators, there was blood on the floorboards. Oakland County authorities dug out the floor, cut out the floorboards, and had the blood analyzed. It wasn't Hoffa's. So what? He could still have been killed in that house. It would have been, to have the blood preserved after all those years would be pretty amazing. Maybe he was killed there. I don't know.
What do you think?